What is stem cell research all about? We asked Professor Shimon Slavin, Chairman of the Department of Bone Marrow Transplantation and Cancer Immunotherapy of Hadassah University Hospital in Jerusalem, to explain to us, what are stem cells?
Stem cells are young cells that are uncommitted, and they can mature into different subtypes of cells. And of course, there are different types of stem cells. The most primitive stem cell is the embryonic stem cell. It's very primitive, but it can create a whole human being or a whole animal. So it's a very primitive cell that can mature into different tissues. And this is why it is such a popular cell. This is why it's such an important cell, because if it can produce a whole human being, it can produce a heart, it can produce a kidney, it can produce a liver, it can produce islets to secrete insulin and potentially cure patients with diabetes. So that's why it's so important. Now, there are other stem cells. These are adult stem cells. These are stem cells that can be obtained from the cord blood as soon as the baby is born, or from the placenta, or from the bone marrow of an adult person. These are adult stem cells. They are also multipotential. We are not sure if they can create a whole human being, not at this point in time, although the genetic information is there. But they can mature into red blood cells, into white blood cells, into immune cells, and our research shows that they can also mature to different organs, and that's why they are also very, very important.
Professor Slavin, you mentioned diabetes. What other medical benefits can we expect from this research?
Well, since, as I told you, stem cells are multipotential, they can be used for tissue repair. For example, one of the routine procedures that we use is to use stem cells to recover the immune system in patients that have immune deficiency. These are adult stem cells. Or we can use them to recover the hematopoietic systems. After, for example, you knock out the patient's own bone marrow function with high-dose chemotherapy for cancer, for leukemia, for lymphoma, for myeloma. These are the adult stem cells. The embryonal stem cells, in due time, years from now, unfortunately, because there's a lot of research to be done, they can be used for tissue repair, potentially regenerate organs. But we have shown in our research that we can do a lot of tissue regeneration also with adult stem cells. And that's very encouraging because there's no ethical issues involved, and this is something that can be done starting today.
What is the public debate on stem cell research all about?
This is the moment the egg is fertilized. You can see the sperms are fighting to get in. Now you can see where the fertilized egg divided, and you have 4 cells. So in principle, each one of these cells can create a human being. If you cut it with a knife into 4 different cells, you'll get a quadruple. And here is the stage of 8 cells. This is the stage where we normally talk about embryonal stem cells for research or for clinical purposes. Again, each one of those cells can become a human being. And here is a stage a little bit more advanced. You can see more cells. Here you already can see the creation of a fetus. You can see the eye, you can see the head, you can see the body. Here you see already a baby, a mature baby is formed, and here is the baby. So the issue is, when are we dealing with cells, and when are we dealing with potential human being, and when are we dealing with a human being?
How does one produce or isolate stem cells?
Stem cells, adult stem cells, are easy to get because everybody has stem cells inside the bones. And this is a factory that produces all the elements that circulate in the blood, all the immune system, and a lot of cells that play a very important role in different tissues, in the brain, in the lungs, in the skin, everywhere. They are representatives of the stem cells. Also, of course, the circulation of the blood, the immune system. So we can obtain such cells in an adult by aspiration from the bone. And also we can mobilize the stem cells from the bone to the blood and then collect them from the blood through a very simple procedure involving one needle on one side, one needle on the other, the machine processes the blood, separates the stem cells, returns the red blood cells to the other hand, and that's it. It's as easy as that.
So what is your message to the public?
For people who are smart enough to collect cord blood cells when their beloved baby is born, this is a fantastic source of stem cells you can get for free. Instead of going and throwing the placenta to the garbage, you can keep the cells for life, and that's a potential source of stem cells.
How do you preserve stem cells?
Well, first of all, if you get, for example, cord blood stem cells, you can freeze them in liquid nitrogen, and then can be kept for years. There's no limit. However, if you want to use fresh stem cells, there are two types of procedures where stem cells are used. One is called autologous stem cell transplantation, where the patient serves as his own marrow donor. And in that case, you take the cells from the person, you freeze them, you treat the patient, and then you give him his stem cells back. The other type of stem cell transplantation, if you wish, is allogeneic, or a donor donates stem cells to the person. And then you obtain the stem cells from another person, usually a family member, but we also have an international bank that can provide stem cells for patients in need who do not have a relative that matches them.
Do future mothers know about it?
Absolutely. That's currently a routine procedure. Every baby that is born, the mother is offered the option of either storing cord blood for her child or donate the stem cells for the public in a public banks that may be available for patients in need all over the world.
Thank you, Professor Slavin.
It's an important subject, and it's a pleasure to share it with the public.
What are the ethical issues involved in stem cell research? For an answer to that, we decided to interview a rabbi. We have the pleasure now of speaking to Rabbi Yosef Leibovich, who has several callings, one of which is director of the Yad Yaakov Fund for Jewish Education. Rabbi, do you see any halachic problems with stem cell research?
I wouldn't call it halachic problems, I would call it halachic questions, and certainly there are questions. The most serious question is the use of deriving the stem cells from a fetus in uterus, which means that this is potential life. If the fetus was put into the womb of a woman, it would become life. So the major question is then, when does life begin? Are you permitted to interfere with life by removing the stem cells? And that's not only halachic, that's the question which all religions and ethical boards deal with, is that when does life actually begin and when are you interfering with life? The halachic position on this, which the accepted halachic position, is very liberal. And it's based on a Talmudic statement which says that before 40 days, the fetus is only maya ba'alma, it's water, which means there is no life before 40 days, and that therefore that comes out very liberal because the stem cells are removed before 40 days of the formation of the fetus. I have my own questions about that statement, but that is the accepted halachic norm almost universally around the world.
Rabbi, can you relate to which part of the Torah the Talmudic statement is based?
That's a wonderful question. It has a biblical base, but the biblical base is sort of far, and most of the authorities that speak about it actually don't mention the biblical base at all, which is something within halakha itself. It's a statement by Rabbi Chisda. Nobody speaks about where Rav Chisda derived this idea. It's only mentioned once in the Talmud. There are other places in the Talmud where you would have expected it to be mentioned, and it's not mentioned. So this is a good example where the halakha takes a very liberal position by taking this one statement and actually centering it in the halakha. Where does it come from is unclear, but the number 40, where does the number 40 come from? And there doesn't seem to be anything biological which changes 40 days after the conception of the fetus. However, the number 40 in the Bible does appear in many, many key places, and it does appear as a symbol of what I would call a gestation period. For example, the 40 days of the flood, which is the rebirth of the world. The 40 days at Mount Sinai, which is the birth of the Jewish people. The 40 days spying out the land of Israel, which is the creation of the land of Israel. So the number 40 appears in the Bible as a number which precedes something which is creating the world, the Torah or the people of Israel and the land of Israel. Whether Rabbi Chisda derived it from that is not clear. It also appears in another text which is probably closer to our issue, and that is a strange text, that a woman in childbirth is impure. This is in the book of Leviticus. If you look at this description of the impurity, it says for a male child, she's impure 7 days, and then for another 33 days, she sits on the blood of her purity. So you don't need higher mathematics to know that 7 plus 33 is 40. So that the amount of time where a woman emerges from the act of childbirth and comes back into the ordinary world is actually a period of 40 days. The problem there is that it's 40 days for a male child and 80 days, double for a female child. But that probably is part of the answer of Rabbi Chisda. It's what we call a chiastic structure. It takes 40 days for life to come into the fetus and 40 days after birth for the woman to come out of the act of birth. That might have been his source. And I'm told also, I haven't looked up the source, that it's found in Aristotle as well, that 40 days after conception, the soul enters the body. So there's the two sources.
What is the attitude then of halakha on the concept of doing biological research?
It's absolutely positive. It saves life, it enhances life. Halakha is absolutely, I suspect that's why the halakha is liberal in this case. It wants this to go on and it wants it to succeed in order to help life.
Do you see any problems?
Problems are going to come up in the future with genetic engineering. If stem cell research allows us to manipulate the cells, then theoretically on the horizon is the ability, for example, for parents to sit down before they conceive the child and fill out a list of what you want the child to be. How tall, how athletic, IQ. And you can imagine Jewish mothers who feel guilty at this point about not having raised their child properly. Can you imagine if all the child's characteristics were what we chose for them? It's the cutting edge of very, very serious problems about the manipulation of life, and where does the hubris of the human being cease and our ability to feel that we should have the total control over what our children look like and their qualities. That's in the horizon. It's not yet a question. That's going to be a serious halachic question as well, because we don't have clear halachic basis on which to speak about it.
Rabbi Leibowitz, thank you, sir.